Dr. Marcus Reed had been conducting xenobiological research at Kepler Station for 18 months, and in all that time he developed exactly 3 routines that made life at the edge of known space feel like something more than professional isolation punctuated by scientific discovery. Morning coffee in laboratory section C while reviewing overnight data transmissions. Afternoon equipment calibration that served as meditation disguised as maintenance work. An evening contemplation in the observation lounge where the star fields provided better perspective on research problems than any amount of theoretical analysis. It was during his nightly routine of sitting in the same chair, watching the same constellations, and thinking about the same unresolved questions regarding consciousness patterns in deep space organisms that his life became infinitely more complex and interesting than studying alien biology in comfortable solitude. The first sign that his routine was about to change came when someone settled into the chair beside him without asking permission, making introductions, or acknowledging that the observation lounge's unspoken protocol involved researchers maintaining respectful distance while contemplating the universe's more challenging mysteries. Marcus looked up from his data pad to find Lisa Netherian, the Zephyrian cultural anthropologist who had arrived 3 weeks earlier to conduct what she described as comparative consciousness studies, while maintaining the kind of professional reserve that suggested she preferred observation to interaction. Dr. Netherian, Marcus said, noting how her opalescent skin seemed to shift colors in response to the lounge's lighting, currently showing shades of deep blue mixed with silver that he found remarkably soothing to observe. "I hope I'm not occupying your preferred observation position." Lisa turned toward him with movements that seemed to flow like water rather than following the angular precision that most species used for basic positioning. Her eyes held depths like twin galaxies, currently showing colors that shifted between green and gold as she studied his face with obvious recognition. "Dr. Reed," she replied, her voice carrying the melodic undertones that made Zephyrian speech sound like carefully orchestrated music, "you're occupying exactly the right position." The statement felt loaded with meaning that Marcus couldn't quite interpret, though something about her tone suggested she was referring to more than seating arrangements in the observation lounge. "Have we met before?" Marcus asked, studying Lisa's expression while trying to understand why her presence felt familiar despite their limited previous interaction. "Not in this lifetime," Lisa said, her smile carrying harmonics that suggested she was sharing an inside joke that only she understood. Marcus processed this response while noting how comfortable he felt with Lisa's proximity despite the fact that most researchers maintained careful personal space when sharing common areas. Her presence felt natural rather than intrusive, like resuming a conversation that had been interrupted rather than beginning a new one. "Dr. Netherian," Marcus said, "are you speaking metaphorically about previous encounters, or do Zephyrian cultural concepts include literal interpretation of multiple lifetimes?" "Both," Lisa replied, settling more comfortably into her chair while maintaining eye contact that felt remarkably intimate for two beings who had exchanged perhaps 50 words during her 3 weeks aboard the station. "And please, call me Lisa." Formal titles seem unnecessarily distant for people who've known each other as long as we have. "As long as we have." Lisa's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, musical and somehow both familiar and mysterious. "Marcus, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you dream?" The question caught Marcus off guard, partly because of its unexpected nature and partly because it touched on something he'd been reluctant to discuss with colleagues who might question his scientific objectivity. "Everyone dreams," Marcus replied carefully. "Are you asking about specific dream content or general sleep patterns?" "I'm asking about dreams where you meet the same person repeatedly across different circumstances, different places, sometimes even different species, but always with the same immediate sense of recognition and belonging." Marcus felt something electric pass between them as Lisa's question touched on experiences he'd been having since childhood but had never shared with anyone. "Lisa," he said quietly, "why are you asking about those specific kinds of dreams?" "Because," she said, her opalescent skin shifting to warm gold tones that somehow made her seem to glow from within, "I've been having them about you since I was old enough to remember my sleep experiences. And I've been searching the galaxy for 30 years to find the person whose face I see every time I close my eyes." The observation lounge fell silent except for the soft humming of station systems and the distant sounds of other researchers going about their evening routines. Marcus felt reality shift around him as he processed what Lisa was suggesting. "Lisa, are you telling me that you came to Kepler Station specifically to find me?" "I'm telling you that I've followed research opportunities to 17 different facilities across 9 star systems, hoping to encounter the person who's been appearing in my dreams for 3 decades, Lisa replied, her voice carrying new undertones that suggested vulnerability mixed with hope. "When I saw your publication on consciousness patterns in deep space organisms, I recognized your approach to research as compatible with someone I've been looking for." "Compatible how?" "Marcus, most scientists study consciousness as if it were a mechanical process that stops when individual organisms die," Lisa explained, her expression showing the kind of passionate engagement that Marcus associated with researchers discussing their most important work. "But your papers suggest you understand consciousness as something that transcends individual existence." Marcus considered this observation while studying Lisa's face, noting how her expression seemed familiar in ways that went beyond their recent acquaintance. "Lisa," he said, "what exactly do you study in your consciousness research?" "Cases where beings from different species, different worlds, different cultures, experience immediate recognition and connection that suggests shared experiences predating their current existence," Lisa replied. "What some researchers call soul recognition and others dismiss as psychological projection." "And what do you call it?" Lisa met his eyes directly, her gaze carrying depths of emotion that seemed to encompass more than their brief relationship could account for. "I call it coming home," she said simply. "Marcus, from the moment I saw you in this station's personnel files, I knew I'd found the person I've been looking for. And when you looked up at me just now, your expression confirmed that some part of you recognizes me too." As Marcus processed the impossibility and rightness of what Lisa was suggesting, he realized that his comfortable acceptance of her presence, the immediate sense of familiarity, and the feeling that their conversation was continuing rather than beginning all supported her extraordinary claim. "Lisa," he said, "what happens now? Do we proceed with our research while pretending this conversation never happened? Do we explore whatever connection we're experiencing? Do we try to document it scientifically?" Lisa's smile was radiant enough to power the station's navigation systems. "Marcus," she said, "we do what we've apparently been doing across multiple lifetimes. We continue the conversation." As they sat together in comfortable silence, watching star fields that suddenly seemed like familiar territory rather than distant wilderness, Marcus realized that his routine of solitary contemplation had just evolved into something infinitely more meaningful than studying consciousness patterns in alien organisms. He was about to begin exploring consciousness patterns in himself, guided by someone who claimed to have known him longer than he'd been alive. Their evening meetings in the observation lounge evolved into something that felt more like archaeology than conversation, with Marcus and Lisa carefully excavating shared memories that seemed to belong to lives neither of them had lived in their current existence. "Tell me about the recurring dream where we're working in gardens," Lisa said during their 5th consecutive evening together, her opalescent skin showing the warm gold patterns that Marcus was learning indicated deep contentment mixed with intense focus. Marcus set down his data pad, noting how research had become secondary to exploring the impossible familiarity that grew stronger with each conversation. "We're cultivating hybrid plants that can grow in multiple atmospheric conditions. You're teaching me botanical techniques that combine scientific agriculture with something that feels like artistic intuition. And I'm wearing robes that suggest formal education in biological sciences, but the setting feels more like a monastery than a research facility," Lisa continued, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was accessing memories rather than imagination. "Marcus, in that dream, what species are we?" "Both human, I think. But the technology around us suggests a civilization more advanced than current Earth colonies, and the plants we're working with don't match any known botanical classifications." Lisa nodded with obvious recognition. "That's memory set 7 in my dream classification system. We appear as the same species in approximately 60% of the recurring visions, but always with technology and knowledge that transcends current human scientific capabilities." Marcus studied Lisa's expression, noting how she discussed their shared dreams with the same systematic attention she probably brought to her professional research. How many distinct memory sets have you documented? 43 verified sets with consistent details across multiple dream experiences, Lisa replied, activating a small holographic display that filled the space between them with charts, timelines, and correlation analyses that looked like serious academic work. Plus approximately 20 additional sets with partial details that require more data for verification. The holographic data showed patterns of shared existence across what appeared to be different time periods, locations, and circumstances, all featuring consistent personality types and relationship dynamics despite variations in physical appearance and cultural context. Lisa, Marcus said, studying the documentation with growing amazement, this represents decades of systematic research into our shared consciousness experiences. 32 years of documentation, cross-referenced with galactic historical records, archaeological findings, and consciousness research from 17 different species, Lisa confirmed. Marcus, I've dedicated my entire adult life to understanding why I've been dreaming about you since childhood. Before Marcus could respond to the staggering implications of that statement, the observation lounge doors hissed open and Dr. Elena Santos entered with the expression of someone who had been searching the station for her missing colleague. Marcus, Elena said, then paused as she noticed Lisa's presence and the intimate atmosphere their conversation had created. Dr. Netherian. I didn't realize you were collaborating on evening research projects. Dr. Santos, Lisa replied with the kind of gracious courtesy that suggested she was accustomed to explaining unusual research methodologies. Marcus and I are exploring consciousness phenomena that relate to both our specializations. Elena looked between them with obvious curiosity, clearly recognizing that whatever was developing went beyond professional consultation. Consciousness phenomena. Cross-species recognition patterns that suggest shared experiential frameworks transcending individual existence, Marcus said, drawing on his diplomatic training to describe their situation in terms that sounded academically legitimate rather than personally extraordinary. You're studying whether different species can share memories? Elena asked, settling into a nearby chair with the expression of someone whose scientific curiosity had been engaged. We're studying whether consciousness patterns can persist across multiple existence cycles, Lisa corrected, her holographic displays shifting to show data that made Elena lean forward with obvious professional interest. Multiple existence cycles as in, reincarnation research. Elena's tone carried the kind of skeptical engagement that scientists used when evaluating theories that challenged established paradigms. Multiple existence cycles as in documented cases where beings from different species report identical experiential memories that predate their current biological existence, Lisa replied, activating additional displays that showed correlation studies and statistical analyses supporting her research. Elena examined the data with growing fascination. Dr. Netherian, this is the kind of consciousness research that could revolutionize understanding of identity, memory, and interspecies connection. That's the goal, Lisa confirmed. And Marcus represents the most comprehensively documented case of verified cross-lifetime recognition I've encountered in 32 years of field research. Elena turned toward Marcus with obvious amazement. Marcus, are you telling me that you and Dr. Netherian believe you've lived previous lives together? Marcus considered how to explain experiences that challenged everything his scientific training had taught him about consciousness, memory, and the boundaries of individual existence. Elena, he said finally, I'm telling you that Lisa and I share detailed memories of experiences that neither of us has lived in our current existence, and those memories feel more real and personally significant than most of our actual biographical history. Show her memory set 15, Lisa suggested, activating displays that filled the observation lounge with images and data that made Elena's expression shift from skepticism to fascination. This shows you as different species entirely, Elena observed, studying holographic reconstructions of shared dreams that featured Marcus and Lisa as beings whose appearance bore no resemblance to their current forms. Crystalline entities conducting harmonic research in deep space, Marcus confirmed, noting how the images triggered his own recognition of experiences that felt like personal memories despite their impossibility. We spent subjective decades studying consciousness resonance between inorganic and organic life forms. And you both dream about this same scenario with identical details. Identical environmental details, identical research projects, identical personal interactions, and identical emotional responses, Lisa said. Elena, the statistical probability of two beings from different species independently generating identical complex fantasy scenarios is essentially zero. Elena studied the data while processing implications that could reshape understanding of consciousness research throughout the galaxy. Dr. Netherian, how many other cases like this have you documented? 47 verified cases of cross-species lifetime recognition, though none as comprehensively detailed as what Marcus and I experience, Lisa replied. Most cases involve partial memory sharing or limited recognition patterns. And what's your hypothesis about the mechanism involved? Lisa's skin patterns shifted to deeper blue tones that Marcus was learning indicated complex theoretical thinking. My hypothesis is that consciousness represents a fundamental force that transcends individual biological existence, creating persistent identity patterns that seek compatible resonance across multiple lifetimes and physical forms. You're suggesting that love is literally a cosmic force? Elena asked. I'm suggesting that consciousness recognition represents evidence for something that most species call soul connection, but which may actually be measurable quantum entanglement between compatible identity patterns, Lisa corrected. Love is simply how that connection feels to the individuals experiencing it. As Elena left to process the revolutionary implications of what she'd witnessed, Marcus realized that his relationship with Lisa had evolved beyond personal connection into something that could influence scientific understanding of consciousness throughout galactic civilization. Lisa, he said, what happens when other researchers learn about our experiences? Do we become test subjects? Do we lose the privacy to explore our connection naturally? Lisa moved closer, her presence creating the same sense of comfortable intimacy that had characterized their relationship since her first evening beside him. Marcus, she said, we become proof that some connections are so fundamental to consciousness itself that they transcend any attempt to study or explain them. We become evidence that love represents a measurable force in the universe. As they returned to their comfortable silence, watching star fields that now seemed like familiar territory mapped across multiple lifetimes, Marcus realized that his routine of solitary contemplation had evolved into exploration of the most profound mystery either of them would ever encounter. Lisa, he said, I think we're about to revolutionize consciousness research. Marcus, she replied, her smile carrying echoes of recognition across impossible spans of time and existence, I think we already have. The crisis Marcus had been unconsciously anticipating arrived exactly 2 weeks after Dr. Santos witnessed their consciousness research, delivered by Station Director Catherine Wells with the kind of professional concern that suggested his personal experiences had become institutional problems requiring administrative intervention. Dr. Reed, Director Wells announced, entering his laboratory with the expression of someone who had spent considerable time reviewing protocols for situations that shouldn't exist according to established scientific paradigms, I need to discuss the implications of your research collaboration with Dr. Netherian. Marcus looked up from his analysis of consciousness resonance patterns, noting how his formal research had become secondary to documenting experiences that challenged fundamental assumptions about identity, memory, and the nature of individual existence. Director Wells, he replied, Dr. Netherian and I are conducting groundbreaking research into cross-species consciousness phenomena that could revolutionize understanding of identity and memory throughout galactic civilization. Dr. Reed, Dr. Netherian, and you are conducting research into your own psychological experiences that may compromise your objectivity regarding interspecies studies, Director Wells corrected, settling into the chair across from Marcus with obvious concern. The distinction is significant. She activated a holographic display that filled the laboratory with administrative documentation, psychological evaluations, and institutional protocols for managing researchers whose personal involvement might affect professional judgment. Furthermore, Director Wells continued, your research is attracting attention from consciousness specialists throughout the sector who want to study what you're experiencing rather than simply documenting your findings. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized that his relationship with Lisa was being evaluated as a potential research subject rather than a collaborative investigation. Director Wells, are you suggesting that Dr. Netherian and I suspend our consciousness research? I'm suggesting that Dr. Netherian and you consider whether your personal connection might be influencing your interpretation of shared psychological experiences, Director Wells replied diplomatically. Consciousness research requires objectivity that may be difficult to maintain when researchers become emotionally invested in specific outcomes. Before Marcus could respond to what amounted to official skepticism about the most significant discovery of his career, his personal communication device activated with an urgent message from Lisa, whose voice carried distress signals that made his protective instincts flare immediately. Marcus, we have a situation developing. I'm in Laboratory Section D, and I need immediate assistance with consciousness stabilization protocols. Dr. Netherian, Marcus replied, already moving toward the exit while noting how Director Wells was monitoring his response with obvious professional interest. What kind of stabilization protocols? The kind required when shared consciousness experiences begin generating measurable quantum field fluctuations that affect station equipment, Lisa said, her voice carrying undertones of excitement mixed with concern. Marcus, our connection is creating detectable physical effects. Marcus felt reality shift around him as he realized that their psychological research had evolved into something that transcended theoretical investigation into measurable physical phenomena. Director Wells, he said, I believe you'll want to observe this development personally. 20 minutes later, Marcus, Director Wells, and Dr. Santos stood in Laboratory Section D watching Lisa conduct real-time monitoring of quantum field fluctuations that seemed to correlate directly with the intensity of her shared consciousness experiences with Marcus. Explain what we're observing, Director Wells said, studying instrument readings that suggested consciousness phenomena were generating measurable energy signatures. Synchronized consciousness resonance between Marcus and myself creates quantum entanglement patterns that affect local spacetime geometry, Lisa replied, manipulating holographic controls that displayed their combined bioelectric fields in three-dimensional space. Our mental connection generates detectable gravitational anomalies. Dr. Netherian, are you suggesting that consciousness represents a fundamental force comparable to gravity or electromagnetism? Director Wells asked. I'm documenting that consciousness represents a fundamental force that interacts with gravity and electromagnetism in ways that current physics doesn't account for, Lisa corrected, highlighting data that showed their mental synchronization affecting equipment throughout the laboratory section. Dr. Santos leaned forward with obvious fascination. Dr. Netherian, what happens when you and Marcus achieve maximum consciousness synchronization? We share sensory experiences across multiple timeline memories simultaneously while generating quantum field effects strong enough to interfere with station navigation systems, Lisa replied matter-of-factly. And you consider this safe research practice? Director Wells asked. I consider this the most important consciousness research ever documented, Marcus interjected, moving closer to Lisa while noting how their proximity immediately intensified the quantum readings. Director Wells, we're providing the first scientific evidence that consciousness transcends individual biological existence. Dr. Reed, you're providing evidence that your emotional connection to Dr. Netherian creates psychological states that generate measurable physical effects, Director Wells corrected. The mechanism could be anything from quantum consciousness to psychological suggestion affecting equipment sensitivity. Before Marcus could argue that their experiences transcended conventional psychological explanation, the laboratory's primary systems activated with an incoming priority communication from someone whose authority made everyone in the room pay immediate attention. This is Dr. Vexhai of the Galactic Consciousness Research Institute, announced a voice that carried the kind of scientific authority that suggested decades of studying phenomena most researchers considered impossible. We have been monitoring quantum signature transmissions from Kepler station that indicate verified consciousness bridging between different species. The laboratory fell silent as everyone processed the fact that their local research had attracted attention from institutions specifically designed to study consciousness phenomena that transcended conventional scientific understanding. Dr. Vexhai, Director Wells said carefully, Kepler station is prepared to provide full documentation of our research findings and their implications. Director Wells, the Institute is less interested in documentation than in direct observation of what Drs. Reed and Netherian are experiencing, Dr. Vexhai replied. Consciousness bridging represents the most significant breakthrough in identity research since the development of interspecies communication protocols. Marcus felt the weight of galactic scientific attention settling on his shoulders as he realized that his personal relationship with Lisa had become a test case for understanding consciousness phenomena that could influence how multiple species understood identity, memory, and the nature of individual existence. Dr. Vexhai, he said, Dr. Netherian and I are willing to participate in expanded research protocols, provided that our investigation maintains focus on consciousness phenomena rather than treating us as experimental subjects. Dr. Reed, the Institute proposes collaborative research where you and Dr. Netherian serve as both investigators and demonstration subjects for consciousness bridging techniques that could be applied to other compatible pairs throughout the galaxy. Lisa moved closer to Marcus, her presence immediately intensifying the quantum readings while creating the sense of unified purpose that had characterized their relationship since their first conversation. Dr. Vexhai, she said, Marcus and I accept collaborative research participation, provided that protocols acknowledge our consciousness bridging as evidence for persistent identity patterns that transcend individual biological existence. Dr. Netherian, the Institute acknowledges your consciousness bridging as the first verified case of what we term soul science, measurable documentation of identity persistence across multiple existence cycles. As the laboratory filled with beings who understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in consciousness research, Marcus realized that his evening routine of solitary contemplation had evolved into the foundation for scientific revolution that could reshape understanding of identity and connection throughout galactic civilization. Lisa, he said, I think we're about to become the most studied consciousness partnership in the galaxy. Marcus, she replied, her opalescent skin showing patterns that indicated profound happiness mixed with anticipation for challenges ahead, I think we're about to prove that some connections are so fundamental to consciousness itself that they provide evidence for the persistence of love across any amount of time, space, or physical transformation. As quantum readings continued to intensify around their synchronized presence, both understood that their personal reunion had accidentally become proof that consciousness research could document the one force in the universe that truly transcended individual existence. The formal consciousness bridging ceremony took place 6 weeks later in the newly established Interspecies Consciousness Research Institute, a facility that had been constructed specifically to house the equipment required for documenting what Dr. Vexhai was calling the first scientifically verified case of trans-lifetime soul recognition in galactic history. Dr. Reed, Dr. Netherian, announced Dr. Vexhai to the assembled scientists representing consciousness research from dozens of species, you are about to undergo the most comprehensive consciousness mapping procedure ever attempted, designed to document the full scope of your shared identity patterns across multiple existence cycles. Marcus lay on the consciousness bridging platform beside Lisa, surrounded by quantum field generators and consciousness resonance amplifiers that would allow them to access their complete shared memory patterns while providing scientific documentation of phenomena that most species considered religious mythology rather than measurable reality. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked, noting how Lisa's opalescent skin was showing the deep blue patterns that indicated complex emotions involving both excitement and apprehension about what they might discover. Marcus, Lisa replied, taking his hand with the same comfortable intimacy that had characterized their relationship since their first evening together, I've been ready for 32 years. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for what we're about to prove. Dar. Vexhai activated the consciousness bridging systems, filling the research facility with harmonic frequencies designed to synchronize brainwave patterns while amplifying memory access beyond normal biological limitations. Beginning full consciousness integration, Dr. Vexhai announced. Monitoring quantum field fluctuations, bioelectric synchronization, and memory pattern correlation across all documented lifetime scenarios. What followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced during their previous consciousness sharing. Instead of accessing individual memories from their shared dreams, the bridging procedure allowed them to experience their complete relationship history simultaneously, dozens of lifetimes where they had found each other across different species, different civilizations, different forms of existence entirely. He experienced being crystalline entities conducting harmonic research in deep space while she provided organic consciousness perspective that made their work revolutionary rather than simply academic. He felt memories of being aquatic beings exploring oceanic depths while developing philosophical frameworks that combined scientific investigation with artistic expression. He remembered existences as energy beings transcending physical form entirely, working together to establish communication protocols between corporeal and non-corporeal civilizations. Through the consciousness bridge, Marcus experienced Lisa's perspective on their shared history, the consistent pattern of recognition, the immediate sense of completion that transcended physical appearance or cultural conditioning, the way their different skills and perspectives created collaborative capabilities that neither possessed individually. Remarkable, Dr. Santos whispered, monitoring the data streams that showed their consciousness patterns achieving perfect synchronization while generating quantum field effects that influenced equipment throughout the facility. Unprecedented, Dr. HFY corrected, studying readings that documented consciousness bridging across temporal boundaries that shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding of identity and memory. They're accessing verified historical data from civilizations that existed millions of years ago. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus and Lisa experienced not just their personal history together, but the broader context of how consciousness recognition functioned as a fundamental force in galactic evolution. They saw how pairs of compatible beings throughout history had served as bridges between different forms of consciousness, facilitating communication and cooperation that advanced entire civilizations beyond what individual species could achieve alone. Marcus, Lisa said, her voice reaching him through the consciousness bridge with clarity that transcended normal speech, do you understand what we represent? We represent proof that consciousness persistence creates continuity across existence cycles, Marcus replied, feeling her agreement resonate through their shared awareness. We're evidence that love isn't just emotional attachment, but a measurable force that connects compatible consciousness patterns across any amount of time and space. And personally, Marcus experienced Lisa's emotional perspective through the consciousness bridge, feeling her centuries of searching, her dedication to consciousness research, her joy at finally finding the person who made existence feel complete rather than fragmentary. Personally, he said, we represent the most important discovery either of us will ever make, that some connections are so fundamental to who we are that they define us across multiple lifetimes. The consciousness bridging procedure continued for 6 hours, with Marcus and Lisa accessing shared memories that spanned millions of years of galactic history while providing scientific documentation of identity persistence that revolutionized understanding of consciousness throughout known civilization. Dr. Reed, Dr. Netharian, Dr. HFY announced as the procedure concluded, you have provided evidence that consciousness represents a fundamental force comparable to gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces in terms of its influence on the structure of reality itself. What are the implications of that evidence? Director Wells asked. The implications are that consciousness research must be reconsidered as fundamental physics rather than biological psychology, Dr. HFY replied. And that consciousness bridging between compatible beings represents a natural phenomenon that could be developed to enhance cooperation between different forms of life throughout the galaxy. 6 months later, Marcus and Lisa's formal partnership ceremony was held in the same observation lounge where they had first recognized each other, combining consciousness bridging traditions with human commitment customs. The event was attended by researchers from dozens of species who wanted to witness the union that had become proof that love represented a measurable force in the universe capable of transcending any boundary that individual existence could create. Lisa wore ceremonial robes that incorporated consciousness resonance patterns while Marcus discovered that formal consciousness partnership attire included quantum field harmonizers that amplified their natural compatibility into visible light displays that shifted in response to their emotional synchronization. In consciousness bridging tradition, Dr. HFY explained to the assembled representatives, partnership ceremonies represent recognition that some connections transcend individual existence to become part of the fundamental structure of reality itself. Marcus and Lisa demonstrate that love provides evidence for the persistence of consciousness across multiple lifetimes. And in human tradition, Marcus added, looking at Lisa with an expression that conveyed both the miracle of finding her and their shared commitment to exploring consciousness phenomena that their relationship represented. Partnership represents promise to support each other's growth toward their best possible selves across whatever existence cycles we might experience together. Marcus, Lisa said, her opalescent skin showing the warm gold patterns that indicated profound happiness mixed with anticipation for whatever challenges their future might hold. In every lifetime we've shared, the moment I found you felt like coming home to myself. This lifetime is no different, except now we have science to prove what we've always known in our hearts. And what have we always known? Marcus asked, though their consciousness bridge made the answer unnecessary. That some connections are so fundamental to consciousness itself that they create the framework through which we experience existence, Lisa replied. That love isn't something that happens to us, it's something we are, across any form we might take. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the scientific community had ever witnessed, with beings from across the galaxy sharing consciousness-bridging techniques while celebrating a partnership that had redefined their understanding of identity, memory, and the persistence of connection across multiple forms of existence. And in the archives of the Galactic Consciousness Research Institute, their story became the foundation document for what researchers now called trans-lifetime relationship science. Proof that consciousness created patterns of recognition that transcended individual biology to become part of the fundamental structure of reality itself. So, Dr. Santos said, approaching Marcus and Lisa during the reception where consciousness researchers mingled with xenobiologists and quantum physicists, how does it feel to have accidentally revolutionized our understanding of love as a cosmic force? We didn't revolutionize anything, Marcus replied, watching Lisa interact with beings from dozens of species who were eager to understand consciousness-bridging techniques that their relationship had demonstrated. We just provided documentation for something that's been true across the entire history of galactic civilization. And what's that? Dr. Santos asked. That some people are meant to find each other across any amount of time, space, or transformation, Lisa said, moving to stand beside Marcus in the same comfortable positioning that had characterized their relationship since that first evening in the observation lounge. That consciousness creates bridges between compatible souls that no amount of change can break when nurtured by beings willing to recognize what they mean to each other. Marcus put his arm around Lisa with the same instinctive protectiveness that had made him accept her presence that first night, now transformed into something deeper and more permanent that had been scientifically verified as a fundamental force in the universe. The most interesting discovery, Marcus added, is that we're not unique. Consciousness bridging happens throughout the galaxy when compatible beings find each other. We're just the first case that's been comprehensively documented. Which means? Dr. Santos pressed. Which means, Lisa said, her patterns shifting to colors associated with joy and infinite possibility, that the universe is full of people finding their way back to each other across lifetimes, species, and forms of existence we can't even imagine yet. 2 years later, the Interspecies Consciousness Research Institute had documented over 300 verified cases of trans-lifetime recognition, with Marcus and Lisa serving as both researchers and living proof that consciousness created connections stronger than any boundary individual existence could impose. They continued their evening routine in the observation lounge, now fully aware that their comfortable silence represented the latest chapter in a conversation that had been continuing across millions of years, with both understanding that their current existence together was simultaneously their first meeting and their countless reunion. The galaxy, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to prove that consciousness created patterns of love so fundamental to reality itself that they provided the framework through which existence became meaningful rather than random. Marcus never did return to his original research into consciousness patterns in deep space organisms. As it turned out, the most important consciousness patterns were the ones that connected souls across any amount of time and space when nurtured by beings brave enough to recognize that some connections transcend individual existence to become part of the cosmic structure of love itself. They made an excellent team, proving that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries happen when people choose to investigate the one phenomenon that makes existence worth experiencing across any number of lifetimes, finding the person who makes you feel like you're finally, completely yourself. And whenever new researchers arrived at the institute feeling isolated by their work or disconnected from their purpose, they could always find Marcus and Lisa in the observation lounge, ready to explain that consciousness research had proven the most important truth in the universe. Some people are meant to find each other across any transformation existence might require. And recognizing that person feels exactly like continuing a conversation that began lifetimes ago and will continue across any future they might share.